Welcome to the eSPED focus training on PEIMS data entry. Now all PEIMS fields will be mandatory. Entering data in all PEIMS fields will be mandatory. So the learning objectives for today, we have a lot of them, and a lot of them seem to overlap. Participants will be able to identify PEIMS fields in eSPED. So this is even something that I knew, I just didn't know that I knew. Understand why all PEIMS fields must now be completed, regardless of their relevance to the student. Participants will be able to accurately complete all PEIMS fields. Participants will be able to identify the two exceptions, the only two PEIMS fields that may be left blank and should be left blank, or they will cause problems if they don't apply to your student. Participants will be able to navigate to the PEIMS data screen and gain a basic understanding of its purpose and how it can help you. And then participants will be able to understand the purpose of the Validate PEIMS button and how to begin to identify and correct errors. And when I say all of this is in an effort to prepare you for the fact that our PEIMS in eSPED will begin at some point very soon to sync with the PEIMS data in our new Frontline SIS, our new Frontline Student Information System. They do not sync yet. So that's why today's training is a bit of a challenge, because they're not syncing yet. I don't have the ability to give you a live demo in eSPED to show you what an error would look like, to show you what a fatal error would look like and the consequence of that error. But I do have some resources from Frontline and some videos from Frontline to show you what that would look like. So I apologize for the fact that I'm having to kind of pull something that isn't me personally showing it to you, but I'm kind of in the confines of what's available to us in our system right now. Once we are up and running and have the PEIMS sync going live and up and running, then you guys are going to be able to experience and go, oh, that's what she was referring to. And the videos that I will have shared with you today will be available to you. You will be able to go back and reflect upon those, as well as the documents that I have shared with you today. And of course, I will be available. And then we may find the need to add an additional training, maybe add an additional training for your SPED support staff so that they can help you work through some of those errors. So you might find some of today a little mystifying, simply because you're not experiencing it yet. You can't see it yet. You can't feel it yet. You can't touch it yet, but it's coming. And it's coming as soon as January. And so we need everyone to start practicing completing all these PEIMS fields now, because once it hits, it's going to be kind of like a jolt, and you will feel completely unprepared if you don't start practicing now. Okay, so one of the things that I do in all of my trainings is I share my screen-by-screen guide, and this is the same is true today. So in the chat here, I am going to share the screen-by-screen guide. So the screen-by-screen guide I have added, I've just posted that in the chat. And y'all may need to help by reposting that as y'all see more people enter in. So the screen-by-screen guide is one of those things that over the summer, you know, as I was preparing for developing a training for online, what is something tangible that folks will be able to rely upon and go to when they don't have a person to go to, when they don't have an answer right in front of them, but they need to find an answer. And they don't, I know district resources is tremendous. And this eventually is, and some of the things in here are from district resources. It's the difference in this is that it is really a living document. So I ask that really the intent of this is that you bookmark it. Bookmark this screen by screen, save it to your bookmarks bar, but don't save a hard copy, don't print it out, because this morning I updated it, last night I updated it. It's constantly being updated based on new information that we get, like PEIMS beginning to sync. So this is a perfect example of when it needs to be updated. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the screen by screen and show you what it looks like. So here is the screen by screen. I'll go ahead and post that again. So the screen by screen, again, it initially started really just as something I was thinking for new users to get them from the beginning of ArdScreen through the end of ArdScreen, but it's really already blossomed into something that it's not anymore called the ArdForm screen by screen, because we have more than that now. And I have some things that are before the beginning of ArdScreen. And so you'll notice today what has been added is this PEIMS data screen, which is something in ArdForms that we'll see once we get into eSPED, and you'll see once it's demoed in the videos that we watch. But the PEIMS data screen is not a place where data is entered, but it's more of a data collection screen. And so it looks something like this, but it's really a collection of all the PEIMS fields where the data has been entered. And so what I have added here is, as of November 2020, PEIMS data from eSPED and the SIS are not yet syncing. However, this will soon change. So we must now change our practice. And I'm sorry if I have not made this large enough. I am blind, and I don't know why I would expect that you guys could see it if I'm having trouble seeing it right in front of me. Our practice of how we address PEIMS fields before the syncing begins, and we begin experiencing errors and major problems. If we learn now how to avoid those errors and problems by correcting our practice when the sync begins, those things will be much smoother. So we can refer to the hyperlinked document, PEIMS data entry, which is right now, I've simply taken the frontline document. And so what you will notice is throughout this screen by screen guide, anything that is linked here, you will be able to, it's hyperlinked, you can open it here. You do have to be logged in to your SAISD Google account to be able to access the screen by screen and to be able to access all the hyperlinks, of course, within it. If anything had been changed in this document, which sometimes it is, this particular one, of course, it's by Frontline, you would be able to look down here, just hover over it, and it says no changes since you last viewed this file. That's important if you're going to a particular how-to or a particular reference point often, which I think is another beautiful thing about the screen by screen, is you're able to go in and see if changes have been made that you need to call your attention to. So let me go ahead and open this document. I think I actually already have it open. So here is what that document looks like. It tells you that the PEIMS, where the PEIMS codes are entered. It tells you what this little arrow means. And I'm not going into a lot of detail yet because I know we're going to show you a video that's going to explain a little bit more for you. And then this will make more sense to you afterwards. And really what this little blue arrow means, this isn't where we enter the information, like I just said, it's a data collection screen. But this blue arrow will take you to the screen where this information is entered. It won't take you and plop you directly into that field, but it'll take you to the right screen. The other place that I wanted to call your information to is this validate PEIMS. And y'all have probably noticed this already, and you realize that it doesn't work for us. It probably, if you've ever hit it, it says this has been deactivated by your eStar administrator. And then you'll notice down here at the bottom where you have related services and other services, start and end dates are going to have to be input correctly, or that's going to create errors as well. And then the next part is really going to be a nice kind of go-to for you as well. Excuse me. When you see that right here, you'll notice on the PEIMS data entry screen, if you are getting errors and it says like right here, 4 errors found, when you click on this, it'll tell you what the errors are and it'll tell you what kind of error it is. If it's a fatal error, and fatal errors won't let you archive the yard, it won't let you change the draft to an active, it won't let you print the yard without this watermark that says fatal. If it's a special warning, and all that'll be covered in one of the videos. But really, this tells you where the element is and the corresponding screen. So you kind of start to know where to go if you're getting a particular error and how to fix it. So I know all of this is really abstract to you right now, but this is an example of what a PEIMS field is. So the very first thing on our expectations, our learning objectives, was to identify PEIMS fields in eSPED. So I'm going to take you back to this document, and anything that has what I call this notepad with a pencil on it, or notepad document, and it'll say edit next to it, that is a PEIMS field. And you click on that to open that field. You enter the information, and it is always going to have an effective date. And then you're entering the proper effective date. And many times that effective date does depend on whether or not PWN was waived or not. Sometimes that effective date is report dates, and sometimes the effective date is not based on report dates. It's based really on when services will start. So again, a lot of this is going to be covered, but I want you to realize, I try to kind of start off my things and realize that, acknowledge the fact that this online platform may not be ideal and may be out of some of your comfort zones to receive all this information, particularly because you're not in eSPED doing it right now. And especially because we don't even have this feature activated yet, but you're going to have resources to go to. So I also wanted to show you that it's linked here in this document. And then I believe the next thing that we're going to go to is this brief intro into the PEIMS fields. So this is me taking a part of a frontline video, a frontline or eSPED video, and sharing it with you that kind of explains it briefly for us. So let me see if I can get this here. And I'm sorry, I have a lot of things I want to try to minimize here. Sure. talking. It's not talking. It's what? Oh, my sound is muted. I got this, guys.
So I wanted to begin with a quick overview of anybody that's joining us that is newer or might not be as familiar with PEIMS. What is PEIMS? So PEIMS is the Public Education Information Management System, and that encompasses all the student data that is requested and received by the TEA about public education, which includes your student demographic and academic performance information. So all this data that is required and received by the TEA about your students can be entered through your Frontline platform. It can be edited accordingly in your Frontline platform. And we do want to stress that this data should be kept accurate, and it's important for your reporting purposes. And that's just a quick overview to what that is. We're going to begin by covering entering PEIMS data. And first, we're going to be looking at reviewing the PEIMS data screen. We will then go into reviewing your PEIMS validation. And Tiffany also has some troubleshooting tips for you as you go through your PEIMS data information. So at this point, I'm actually going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let Tiffany take over for our live demo of PEIMS data.
All right, let me go ahead. It says I'm disabled now, so just go ahead and give me the ability to share. I let you before.
Okay,
there we go. Thank you. Yep, I got it. Okay, hi, everybody. All right, so in just a second, you should see my screen. Excellent. All right, so PEIMS data is actually in all of our applications. We are focusing on art today. So in order to get to the PEIMS data screen, you're going to go to Special Education, Art Forms. You're going to select your student, and then, of course, enter your FERPA. So the PEIMS data screen is going to be towards the top. Mine just happens to be 5. You know that the screen numbers change just depending on what you have access to, but it's going to be in the first group of screens. When you come to the screen, you got to look at it as a data collection screen. This is not a screen you enter information on. This is just a collection of the dates that are entered throughout the ARD. So if you're going through the ARD screen by screen, you're going to hit all the PEIMS elements regardless. But if you want to just jump to a PEIMS element and enter it just one off, you can actually click on the entry screen arrow, and that will take you right to the screen that the element is on. Now, in order to find the PEIMS element, they all look the same. They all actually have this little piece of paper with a pencil, kind of diagonal, and it'll say edit, and then whatever the name of the PEIMS element is. So you just go ahead and click on the word edit, and then you have the ability to fill in whatever the PEIMS element is, and then the effective date. Effective dates, this is really up to you in the district. Some districts will change the effective date every ARD, and so they're always going to be the ARD date. Some districts will only change effective date if there was a change. So if they've been, SLD for the last 4 years, you may have, a date in here 4 years ago. Other districts may update it every ARD. That's completely up to you and your district how you handle that.
So at this point, I'm going to interject and say that this particular PEIMS field, these particular the disability fields would be something that only our assessment people should be touching. And it's my understanding that they would only be changing those or changing the effective date naturally if something were to change. They're of course not in all of our annuals. So you're not going to be going in at each annual and changing the effective date.
By using that little arrow to jump to the screen, I can always jump right back to the PEIMS data screen by clicking this return button at the top. This will appear when you're doing this kind of work. Typically not there if you're just going through the ARD screen by screen. See how it disappeared? But as soon as I use it to jump somewhere, then it pops right up for me. Most of your PEIMS elements are located, but really the good majority of them are actually located on your placement of services screen. So I like to use a screen as an example just so you can see, how many there are. We've got here, one here, one here, one here, one here. You should really be addressing all of them. Okay, so even if the answer is no, they're not early childhood or they don't have regional day school, you should still address them because they can't just be left blank. So you want to make sure that you're addressing everything that she's got. Once you've gone through your art and you've entered all of the PEIMS data, in order to make sure that you've entered everything, you've caught them all, and two, you don't have any inconsistencies, that brings us to the validate PEIMS button. Validate PEIMS is basically just saying, what errors do you have? What is not consistent, what doesn't make sense, or what fields did you skip? So I'm going to go ahead and click on validate PEIMS. I already see I have some errors. Now, when you click validate PEIMS, don't be scared by this pop-up. It looks like a lot of information, and we'll get support tickets saying, I don't know what any of this means with the code 41163. Don't panic. If you just read the error condition, you can pretty much figure out what you're missing and what it's telling you. So, let's just use the first one as an example. If a student is age 3 or more, which the student, if I look up here, is 10, okay? So if the student is age 3 or more, the ECI code must be no. Well, okay, what does my ECI code say right now? It says yes. So there's an inconsistency. There's no way the student can be ECI yes if they're 10. So you need to make sure you clear up your errors or you're not going to be able to continue. So I'm going to go to my little entry screen button, jump to my screen, find my ECI code, and I'm going to change that to, oh, wait, wrong one, sorry. Let's see. They're going to be no as a 7-8, save. And then I found my early childhood, here's my other one, ECI, no, save. Now, when I go back and I click return, jump me back to my PEIMS page, my errors are now down to 3. So there were a bunch of errors in there, all concerning that whole ECI issue. So now that I've done that, I only have 3. And these are pretty easy. It looks like I've not done my speech indicator code. I skipped it entirely, it's blank. And I have the same for assistive technology, and I don't have a grade on the student. So again, it's telling you exactly what you need to fix before you complete the art. There are different severities of PEIMS errors. If it's an F, that means fatal. That means you must address it. There's no way around it. You won't be able to continue. Then there's a severity of SW, which is special warning. And special warning is the things that are really what's just drawing your attention to it. So as an example, and I don't have one on the screen, but as an example, if you have a student who's got 4 disabilities and the 4th one is speech, sometimes, our system won't register because it obviously doesn't have the 4th one on the screen. So if your 4th is speech and your speech indicator code is yes, you're going to get a special warning just saying, hey, just making sure that you know what's going on. All right. I see we had a question come in. I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna know the answer, but I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, I was gonna bring this up later, so that's cool. Beth, do you know if next year we will still leave the dyslexia code blank and not get an error? I am all over that to have that ready.
So it's important to understand the time reference of this. This was done, I think, summer before last. So when she's answering this question, yes, dyslexia stuff is active and does create errors.
By the start of school, I'm doing my best. Beth is referring to the new dyslexia edition. Right now, they do not trigger any kind of PEIMS error. So if you left them all blank, it's not going to catch it. If there's inconsistencies where you say they're not eligible for dyslexia, but then you say that they're getting instruction for it, it's not picking it up. So I did just push that through last week that this is a must-have for the beginning of school. And I appreciate everybody's patience through last year. But yeah, so I'm very, very hopeful. I kind of feel like we need to have it done. Okay. So, let me Just make sure that there's nothing. Okay, great. All right, so that's the basics of just entering Teams data and validating Teams, which is really just correcting your errors. I do want to draw attention to one more area that you might see, and that has to do with SPED status. So your district can set students to be validated for Teams based on their SPED status. Right now, I've got currently served.
So I'm sorry, I keep interrupting, but what I want to point out to you is right now, where this says, and I'm sorry if it's hard to see, but it says include in nightly PEIMS export. Despite the fact that this may try to be changed, where you have this PEIMS reportable, try to change that, it will always default right now because we don't have the sync turned on. It will always go back to disabled by the district eStar administrator. So just pointing that out as she goes into a little bit further, deeper explanation of specific SPED statuses that might automatically be deactivated.
And I validate PEIMS, I can click it, I can find my errors, it all works out. But if I switch this over to archive only, just another random SPED status, I get this message. District eStar administrator is deactive PEIMS validation for this record. That's a big chunk of info. All this is saying is that for this SPED status, we're not going to check for errors. And there's numerous reasons why your district might set that up. Dismissed and withdrawn are definitely one. So if you're doing an ARD where a student is being dismissed from special ed, obviously they're not going to have a primary disability. So you don't want to look for PEIMS errors. So if you see this here, like let's say you're on your PEIMS page and you're like, okay, Tiffany said to now go ahead and do my PEIMS checking, and this is what you've got, it has to do with your SPED status.
Okay, so that was just the part of the recording that I wanted you to see. Let me go to chat. Oh, sorry. Oops. So I see a few questions. I will see if I can address those right now before I go further. If a reeval is conducted and a disability does not change, does the assessment person still update the date of that PEIMS or leave it with the original date? I'm going to leave that up to assessment person. I'm thinking they probably leave it at the original date because it's not changing. But of course, that's an assessment call, and I am not an assessment person, but I am thinking that they probably leave it. If I have a student with a SPED disability with a dyslexia condition, would I put on the PEIMS receiving dyslexia services the student is under SPED? So hold on to that, Jasmine. Hold on. I'm going to hold on to that one for just a second, and let me go down to the next question. The next question is, when the PEIMS validate button, when will the PEIMS validate button be active on the PEIMS data screen? So that is something that is still being worked on between Frontline and the district eSPED, because there's a lot of wheels in play. I think that there's been some discussion about January, February some point, but we are trying to get in front of it, and which is why we're preparing right now, so that everybody can change their practices now and begin to be ready to kind of be ahead of the game so that you guys aren't overwhelmed by errors that you weren't expecting. So one of the examples that she showed in the error in this video that we just watched was the early childhood. So thus far, we have trained, hey, if your student isn't in early childhood, you don't need to worry about that. And I can go in right now just so that I'm not talking about something that, I apologize, is vague, and I'm not speaking to a specific student. Let me go into that actual screen. And most of these PEIMS things, and we'll go through student by student. I'm actually going to go through my don't touch this. I'm not going to sing, don't worry. I'm writing the student's IEP. Most of these PEIMS, and you will find that most of the PEIMS errors that you come across are going to end up on your placement of services 1 screen. And you will also notice there's that validate PEIMS right here. Right now, you don't see it, it doesn't pop up, but it says, oh, the district D-STAR administrator has invalidated or deactivated this right now. But this early childhood right now, well, I have it filled in because I practiced that already. That's part of my practice. But right now, y'all have been trained. If your child is 10 years old, don't worry about going in and filling in early childhood services because it doesn't apply to your child. Well, once we have the sync turned on, that's going to be an error, like Tiffany just showed us in the video. So it's very easy to click on that button and it says yes or no. It's very easy to click no, and then the effective date can be the date of the ARD or the date that PWN goes into effect. And quite frankly, it can be the date of the ARD because the student's already 10. And then ECSE service location, that's a little bit different. It asks you all these questions. You know your kid's a no, so don't worry about it. It's a 0, and then you can enter the same date if your kid's a no. It's just we cannot, not that we don't want, we cannot have those places left blank. And in a little while, I'm going to show you yet another video that goes in and explains the 2 exceptions that can be left empty and actually should be left empty so they won't cause further error. But here's that other EC, early childhood intervention indicator. So again, you're just clicking, selecting no if it doesn't apply to your student and entering the date. Now here's one that throws a lot of people off. Regional Day School for the Deaf. Again, this is another one. It didn't apply to my student, so I left it blank. And that's how we've trained you up till now because we have never had a system in the district that synced with the SIS. And so it's never created an error. But now we know it's coming up. So now we're going to change our practice. So I'm simply clicking on this. Is my student enrolled in a regional day school for the deaf, in the regional day school for the deaf? No. Or do they participate in RDSPD? For the majority, except for maybe those 39, 40 students that do participate in it, it's going to be not enrolled. And then you're going to select the date. And again, once that date is in there, unless I'm told otherwise, you're not having to go in and update that every year, unless I'm told otherwise, because it's going to be causing some other kind of problem. So if you select the regional day school for the deaf that they're not enrolled, then it makes sense that there's not a provider for RDSPD. So this is one of the 2 instances where this should be left blank, or it would cause problems. We don't want to go in and put a provider if the student's not enrolled in RDSPD. And then interpreting services, kind of along the same lines, you can go ahead and, Dr. Williams, would you like to chime in? Sorry, Dr. Williams has posted in our chat. Dr. Williams is our executive director for special education.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to be disruptive, although that's kind of what I do. I just wanted to, I put a little note in the chat. I just wanted you all to know how much we appreciate you being part of this on a Saturday morning. I know that people are tired and ready for a break, and to see 79 people in a training of I'm like, woohoo, Knuckles, you're the bomb.com.
They're the bomb.com.
They are. Y'all, I just wanted to say thank you. I know that things are challenging these days. That's probably the nicest way to put it. But I want you to know that we see how hard you're working. We appreciate that you're showing up for kids and making their lives better every day. And I just want you to know that we see that, we appreciate it, and our goal is to support you in that. So the other part is try to get some good downtime this weekend, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday coming up. So that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. That's very kind of you. Very nice for you guys to be acknowledged as well. See Kelly Mullins echoing Dr. Williams and her shout out to the Brewer Academy staff. So shout out to you guys from Brewer Academy. I haven't gotten to the sign in yet, but as soon as we get to our woohoo, Miss Lip says over there. I love school pride. I think it's awesome. I'll be copying and pasting your names into our Wheel of Fortune, or little bitty fortune for your giveaways here as we go in a second. So I think that is, I want to get to some of these other questions, but I really wanted to show you kind of in here. We always knew that we were addressing speech therapy services, even if our student, did not receive speech therapy. We were always addressing these. So I know, Jasmine, I kind of put a pin in your question for right now. And then when will the PEIMS validate button be active on the PEIMS data screen? I'm thinking January-ish. I don't have a further pinned down date as of this point. I know that we are periodically, team of us have been meeting with between the data warehouse people and some of the other folks from the SIS group, from the SIS group, and then ourselves have been meeting with Frontline to see when everything can kind of be ready together. There's a lot of things that have to all kind of piece together and flow together nicely before it all is going to work out. So Jasmine, make sure I come back to you. And actually, let me go right now. So Jasmine, you might have to chime in. So when we're talking about dyslexia, the dyslexia PEIMS fields are actually over here once we get into supplements. And so they may be kicked off as errors only if the student is dyslexic, which would be determined if it says yes, perhaps. Jasmine, do you want to maybe unmute yourself and clarify your question? Jasmine's shy. Student with a SPED disability with a dyslexia, would I put the PEIMS receiving dyslexia services? I do have actually in the screen by screen, let me see if I can bring this to Jasmine's attention at least. In the screen by screen, we do have a dyslexia, the screen for dyslexia. And, oh, I'm sorry, Jasmine says she can't unmute herself because she's on her phone. No worries, no worries, no worries. There is a how-to on the dyslexia supplement, and that might help answer your questions, Jasmine. As far as PEIMS data, that may be something that we get more information on once it turns on, but I believe if this field, this second PEIMS field is yes, then I believe that will trigger consistencies or inconsistencies for the rest of this. And how to complete this dyslexia supplement, there is a how-to on your screen by screen. And I also want to point out on the screen by screen, If you're just looking for all those hyperlinked resources, although the screen by screen does go through each screen field by field, at the very end, all the hyperlinked resources have been added alphabetically so that you're able to, although these were not alphabetical. I guess I put the videos at the end and then I didn't. Okay, so anyway, they are all here as well. Let me go back into the questions. Are there still fields in PEIMS that teachers will not have access to, such as changing demographic information that only SIMS clerks can change? Demographic information isn't PEIMS information. And there's nothing that SIMS clerks would have access to that you would not. I will say that there has been, this week, I contacted Frontline. There has been some issues with some of the demographic information properly syncing with eSPED, and so they're working on that. So if you're getting two different phone numbers or addresses between eSPED and the SIS, you need to really go with what is in the SIS at this point. Will we have to do review Rs to correct this that have already had annuals and we left those areas blank? So no, not at this point. If they didn't create errors for you right now, no. As we move forward, if they created errors, then and they were not, you know, fatal errors, but they were errors that didn't get corrected and errors that are going to be popping up as inconsistencies. I know what this looks like in two previous districts. In one of my districts, we would get error reports, and really the reports would show kind of like right now. I don't know how involved, at what levels y'all are involved in, but one of the things that we do is we kind of hand generate a lot of side-by-side reports between the SIS and eSPED. But one of my districts kind of generated that for us. This is what eSPED says, this is what the SIS says, and this is the inconsistency. It needs to be fixed someplace, which is right. And so then at that point, if it's incorrect in eSPED, which generally that's where the error is, then yeah, then you would have to go back to do, depending on what the error is, an amendment or a revision to correct it. But not at this point, no. I think that answers both of those questions, but at this point, no, you're not having to go in to do those. Okay. So I think right now what I would like to do is, I'm sorry, does somebody ask a question?
I was writing down notes, Ms. Knuckles, and you said when we get an error, either the F for fatal, SW for special worry, where it says, just so you know what's going on, you either have an amendment, or what was the other to correct those?
Special warning or a warning. And really, special warning is, fatal is not gonna, you're gonna have to correct it before you finish the yard. It won't let you print it. It won't let you turn the draft into active. If you try to print it, it'll just be a one watermark that says fatal error or errors. So you have to correct it before that.
And the two ways to correct is amendment or
a revision, depending on what the error is. The special warning or the warning, and those are the same kind of errors that are kind of in sync with what the Frontline SIS errors are, and which is nice. But the example that is most frequently that I've come across is that speech being the fourth disability, and it will always come up as a special warning. And so you're just making sure that, yeah, he still does have that fourth disability. So yes, I still have speech and other disabilities, that number 2 for my speech indicator code.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to get into my, not this, not that, not this. Oh, yes, this. It is Amazon $10 gift card or a Starbucks $10 gift card. Who will win? Let's give it a spin. But before we do that, I'm going to have to take a break so that I can get all your names entered into the Wheel of Tiny Fortune. So let me get to the, sorry guys, the, no, sorry. I'm going to get there. And first I'm going to remember to pause. Welcome back to the eSPED focus training for PEIMS data entry. We are going to now return, and actually we're going to go in and watch yet another video to give us a little bit of an idea, a little bit deeper overview of what our PEIMS entry can look like. And so I'm trying to find here, this is the brief intro. Yes. Do you have a question? Sorry, didn't want to do that. Okay, so this is a more in-depth overview. This was actually, I'm pulling from a frontline webinar that I attended, and it's not the full thing, and I'm sorry, it's you know, it's secondhand, but this is the only way that I can give you guys a view of what it looks like, since we don't yet have the feature active in our system. But it's great information, and a lot of it is going to, some of this is repetitive of what you just viewed in the other video, but again, it goes into a little bit more information, and it's also going to tell you a little bit about what my role, so when it refers to the eStar administrator, that's me, and how I can kind of play a role in helping out when we get in, when you may get into some of the really tricky errors. And most of them aren't. I will say the ones that are the most disconcerting have to do with disability changes that are done when you're in an active record as opposed to in a draft record. So here we go. I think.
All right, good afternoon again, everybody. Today's session for our webinar is a high-level PEIMS overview. The purpose of today's session is to review the functionality of PEIMS, not document sharing collaboration portal. My bad, that wasn't updated. So we're going to be reviewing the PEIMS session of PEIMS information and go from there. And here's what the agenda for today looks like. We're going to first begin with a user level review of PEIMS, talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to move into the administrative level of PEIMS and review some of those highlights. Number 3 is a big one. We're going to talk about PEIMS validation, and then we'll end with the recap and next steps, including materials we might have in the Learning Center. Some of the items today, particularly number 2, the admin level review of PEIMS, are geared towards people that have administrative role permissions. But if you are an end user, the validation of PEIMS and the user review of PEIMS is very pertinent to you. Just be mindful, there are some pieces today that do require admin role permissions. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Tiffany, and she's going to begin, I think. Or is it still me?
It doesn't matter. I can do this.
Okay.
First, yeah, you can just click. So everybody, this is Tiffany. So yeah, I'm going to be doing this part of it. So let's first just go through again a quick review of what is PEIMS. PEIMS stands for Public Education Information Management System. Click. And it's a way that the data elements are reported to TA each year. And then TA is going to take that information used for funding, accountability, and reporting and report that to the Department of Education, which I believe now takes us to our demo. Perfect. All right, I'm going to grab the screen from Joanne. Everyone should see eStar. So today's session is going to be a little bit of a blend, like Joanne was saying. We're going to just do a quick review of the PEIMS data entry piece. We did a webinar on that not too long ago, and that's available in the Learning Center. From that webinar, we kind of got the feeling, and from some of the tickets we've been getting, that there's just, you know, some PEIMS stuff that just needs to be put together. You know, we just have some gaps where administrators aren't quite sure what they're seeing on the screen, so it's really hard for them to help their users. So this is more geared to a little bit of the high level overview, but I do want to take a minute to just revisit ARD forms and what your users are doing. So I'm going to go into special education, ARD forms. I'm just going to pick a student. And go ahead and pick a. So all of the PEIMS data is collected throughout doing the ARD process, and it all gets populated to this PEIMS data screen. So everything they fill out, they do every screen in the ARD that has a PEIMS element, it does populate this screen. This screen you can't do anything on, you can't make changes to, it's just a collection screen. But if you did want to make changes, you can click the entry screen arrow. That takes you to the screen that that element is on. And to find the element, they do stand out because they have this little piece of paper, and a pencil is their signifier that that's a PEIMS element. Almost all PEIMS elements need to be completed, almost all. And there are two exceptions to that rule. First exception is in primary, secondary, and tertiary. Obviously, if you don't have a secondary or tertiary, you don't need to complete those. You can leave them blank.
So that's the first exception that she's just told us. And again, that's our assessment personnel anyway that would be entering or not entering that information. But it's going to be secondary or tertiary disability, that if your student doesn't have those can be left blank. Further down the screen here, these cannot be left blank. These must be completed. And when I do my training, any of those those of you that have gone to either my new user and or my refresher training, know that I tell you, don't touch this. This is the wheelhouse. This is the expertise. This should only be touched by our assessment personnel. But you guys as case managers, and I'm referring to you guys as case managers on the whole. I know that we have SLPs and that we have some assessment staff in our audience now, but y'all are second eyes if you're not the assessment personnel. And I know SLPs are the other cross section that you're both. But y'all are the second set of eyes. So if you don't see, for instance here, even on this example, specific learning disability is selected, but the box isn't checked. And I know that's me just being picky. That's not the purpose of what this screen is for right now. But you're the second set of eyes. So if it doesn't look right to you, please reach out to the appropriate assessment personnel so that it gets completed properly. All right.
The other one that we get a lot of tickets on, that being that we're doing more of a high level, I wanted to bring up. So this may seem like just a mishmash of tips, but really we're just pulling it from all the questions that we get from y'all. So the other one we get a lot of questions on is RDSPD provider, regional day school desk. This is located on two different screens. So if you click the entry screen button, it does take you to the RDSPD supplement. Okay, which you can fill it out here if you want.
And unless you're an RDSPD staff member, you wouldn't be going to this supplement. So you would be going to where she's getting ready to go, where I showed you earlier, which is the placement of services one screen. But the reason I'm showing you guys this video is, like they said, these are the most commonly asked questions, which is why they developed this webinar, was to address these issues. So it's not to really, overwhelm you with some of the same information, but to show you how important it is.
But more commonly, we all know that it's on the placement of services one screen. And that's going to be down here. Now, this is where it gets not tricky, but where you don't have to fill something out. So you do have to address regional day school desk and interpreting services. A lot of people will leave these blank and then they get a validation error, which we'll look at, towards the end of the webinar. And then they fill everything out, including RDSPD provider. If the answer to regional day school desk is not enrolled, you don't need a provider. Okay, so it's the other element there you can skip if they're not receiving services. It makes sense, but if you're a new user or even just someone who doesn't do a lot of art, your users may not remember that. They click here, they see an option, they just pick it, thinking they're doing the right thing. So that is the other one that can be left blank, is your RDSPD provider. As long as they're not enrolled. If they are enrolled, then you do need to have a provider. And we will talk about, when we get to the admin side, where these options come from, because that's another ticket we're getting a lot. How do I populate this drop down with my RDSPD providers? So we will look at that in a moment as well. So again, as your users fill out their art, all of their PEIMS elements will populate here. So, do we have any check questions coming in? I don't see any yet. So that's good. So let's talk about validation, okay? Because again, this was reviewed in our data entry webinar, but again, it's really important to PEIMS to understand what you're doing. These errors are telling you there's an inconsistency somewhere in this information, the information right here on the screen. So you're not going to get any kind of error about anything else other than PEIMS, which seems to be a little confusing. Some people are thinking that it could have to do with other pieces of the art. No, these errors are just saying there's either something missing on this screen that needs to be there, or there's an inconsistency. Do you have any questions? I think I saw someone have an ECI question.
Yeah, we had a question about when the student is not in ECI, they get that error a lot.
Okay, that you're not saying no, yeah, because you will get that error if you don't say that they are not in ECI. And you also have to check on a lot of these, the ones with the early childhood, and there is, what is the other one? There's another one that has to do with their age, that your age is correct and your date of birth is correct and your start date is also agreeing with that. So here's a good example. That brings ECI right into it for you, Lauren. So let's say that my student turns 3 years old on October 1st. Okay, they turned 3. So they would be, let's see, which one would they be? They would be coming out of they would be in ECI, because that would be by their 3rd birthday. If your PEIMS date, it's also going to look at the PEIMS date. So if your PEIMS date is still before their 3rd birthday, you're going to get an error saying that their age doesn't match with the code you chose. And I think it's service location is really the one I'm thinking of. But if you get an error that says, hey, you've left ECI blank, you have to address it, even if it's a no. If you get the error that says that the code and the age don't match up, check the date you have here for the effective date. If that date is before their 3rd birthday, you're still going to get an error.
Do all the dates?
Answer the question.
Sorry. Do all the dates on this page need to be the same?
No, they do not. So let's talk about dates. And like, again, I know it's like a mishmash of info, but it's it's stuff you need to know. These dates can be handled however you want in the district. These dates, unless you have a PEIMS import-export set up with us, and in that case, you are trained a little bit more on what these dates need to be. And it's not even that they need to be anything. You just know what they need to do to match with your SIS system. So let's take that out of it. Let's just say you just use eStar. There's no PEIMS information flowing back and forth. These dates can be whatever you want. We don't use them. They don't print anywhere. What they can be is the date of the art, the most recent art. They could also be the date that you last changed it or added it. So again, you could have a kid come into special ed in 2018 and half of these still say 2018 because maybe they've been, speech for that long. So they've never updated those dates. It just shows year after year that there's still speech. Some districts decide to change this effective dates with every ARD meeting. That's okay too. You can do that as well. Even if it stays the same, they're updating the date. The third thing you might see in here are summer dates. And you can see that on my screen. I've got a ton of dates that say 7-8. When you do your beginning of year update, you have the choice to either change 3 of these elements, the 3 major ones, which is instructional setting, speech, and I want to say it's early childhood, to roll those over because all of those have that next year option. And then you can leave the rest alone, or you can choose in your rollover to change all of your PEIMS effective dates. So if you have that same summer date running all the way down your screen, that means that your district administrator chose to update all PEIMS dates to the summer. Again, if you're not using a PEIMS import and export with us and you're just simply using eStar, that's fine. These can be that way forever. Or when I do the next ARD in November, I can change each one of these to November, whatever it is. So as far as what those dates have to be, there really is no answer to that. You can either have them be the date of the ARD, you can have them be the original date that the services were entered or changed, or you could have summer dates depending on how your administrator is running the rollover.
So Lauren is the one who asked that question, and she just kind of explained that you don't want to do something incorrect that affects funding. If you have multiple districts, should you change the first day of the new year for each district? She has 5 districts.
Okay, so this has to do with it really has less to do with eStar and more to do with your SIS. So if you have, and that's where funding comes into it, because what you have in eStar is your snapshot's not coming from eStar. Your snapshot is coming from your student information system in your district. So it really depends on that. I know for districts that use eSchool requires that these start dates be the first day of school, because that makes it easier for eSchool to then create the data for the snapshot and get the right funding date. If you're not integrating PEIMS back and forth with us at all, meaning there's no PEIMS file, your PEIMS clerk still updates whatever student information system you're using, these dates don't mean anything. It all has to do with what she's entering in your SIS. And that's really dependent on the SIS you're working with. We have plenty of districts that have dates in July here for years, so they just do the rollover every year. It's not affecting their funding because, again, these dates don't go anywhere. They're not being used for the snapshot. Everything's coming out of your SIS, which is your information system.
If a child has more than 3 disabilities other than speech, will the child always show an error with the speech indicator code as speech and other services?
Absolutely, they will. So yeah, that is a great question. If they've got, 4 disabilities and the 4th one is speech, you're going to get a special warning error on the screen because it's not going to see speech in the first 3, but it is going to see a speech indicator code of speech and other services, or speech only, speech and other services. It will give you a special warning error that it doesn't match. That's okay. The special warning errors do not print a watermark on your document. It doesn't stop it from you making the draft active. It's really just pointing it out, saying, hey, just making sure you're aware. You said speech, but we don't see it, but we all know that it is okay for them to have a 4th disability, or 5th for that matter. And yes, you can archive with a special warning, yep.
Primary disability and PEIMS reportable have 2 different dates. Why is that?
All right, so it all depends. Again, this PEIMS reportable, if you have a nightly PEIMS import export with us, that's important. If you do not, and you do not send, we don't send you PEIMS information, which means, again, your PEIMS clerk is manually updating your student information system from eStar, PEIMS reportable means nothing. If you do have an import and export, the PEIMS reportable is just what date did you start including the student on the file. Okay, so I mean, in the event of you actually having an export, you could have two different dates, because you could start, again, like this one. We started reporting him in 2019, but maybe they had a disability change in 2020, which is why the date's different. That's okay. They're still being reported. But again, if you don't have a nightly user import for PEIMS, that you could put in any date you want. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't do anything. Let's see, Lauren, we import from Skyward. So the first day you started serving the student. Lauren, I'm really not even, again, I'd have to know if your district has the import and export. I want to say I know your district. It's like on the tip of my tongue. I don't know so you only import. So you do have a PEIMS import. So yeah, then the PEIMS reportable field is important. Just to make sure that they are you have to have a 1 there to make sure that they're included on the file. I'm reading through the question. We only import to eSPED, so it comes from Skyward to us, to you. Okay, this seems to be a little bit more on the individual district side. So after we're done, if you want to stay on, then you and I can go through this, because again, I have to know the district, and I know each school requires that. I don't know much. I don't know if Skyward does or what they're looking for. So yeah. All right, but these are good questions. You guys actually crossed a whole bunch off of my list already that I was going to go through. That fourth disability being speech. You know, the date's not, you know, your PEIMS reportable versus primary. So you guys actually really did already get through some stuff. Let's continue with the validation talk, though. Everyone gets real scared when they click the PEIMS errors and they get this. There we go. And they get this box. Don't be afraid of this box. This box does tell you everything you need to know on what's wrong with the student. Sometimes people will send screenshots of this box and say, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, this box is your friend. And I know that I'm letting this play through some of the questions they asked during this webinar, and some of them are applicable to us, but some of them are. And so I think that's why this is a good webinar to share with y'all through this training. But I think that's one of the most important things that you can take away from today is once we do go live with the sync, is that this validation, whether it's here that you click it or anywhere else throughout the IEP that you may find to validate PEIMS, that this is your friend. It's here to help you. It's not here to scare you.
Don't worry. Just if you read, it does tell you. It's a little bit, you know, sometimes it could be a little bit more, you know, less, you know, static, but, you know, it is telling you what you need. So in this case, I got 5 things wrong with this file. The first one, the speech indicator field must include a setting, which is a start date and text field. They cannot be blank. All right, so first one is speech. It's telling me that I need a speech code. It's blank. I'm going to go to entry screen. I'm going to come down to speech. It's blank. And edit some speech. Let's say they've got speech and other services. And we'll just say it was June 3rd. Now when I return, I'm going to be down 1 error. Now I'm only going to have 4. Now sometimes you try to fix an error and you end up with more. And you're like, what happened? So let's just say, I say that the speech indicator for this student is actually no speech. And I click save. When I return, now all of a sudden, I still have this, I do have speech on here. I still have 4, but now I have another issue, is that I already said they did not have speech, but here's speech. So again, it's looking for consistency. So if I say there's no speech, but there is here, I'm still going to get another error saying, hey, you've got a problem. Kelly, I'll handle your question in just a second, because that's going to change our direction. So clicking on this other thing, the assistive technology indicator field must have a start and end date, or I'm sorry, start date and text. The grade field is empty. Related service entry must have a start and end date. These are all things that are right on the screen. You just gotta scroll and find them. My related service entry doesn't have a start date. That's a problem. You go to my screen, edit, add a start date. And I mean, you should have a start and an end date. So we'll just, all right, so then we're gonna save that. And then that's gonna clear that error. So I just try to tell every user that, writes in things like this to just, take your time, read this box. It's going to tell you everything. Fatals have to be taken care of. Special warnings you can leave. That will not affect anything you're doing with the file. No watermark. You can archive and you can make drafts active. Any other questions? Oh, so yeah, any other questions on here before I go and look at art history? Question. Can you walk us through the error message primary disability date is before the first PEIMS reportable date? So that probably means you have a back and forth with us, okay, that you do have an import export with us. So that means that, yeah, you can have a primary disability date before the reportable date. Okay, so if that's really just the answer to the question. I can't have a primary disability date that's 10/1 and then have a PEIMS reportable date of 11/1. That doesn't, you can't have that. So you have to backdate this reportable date, which brings me perfect segue into where I was going. You cannot backdate PEIMS dates in an active file. They will not let you. So in the example I just gave where I need to backdate something to 10/1 from 11/1, I'm never going to be able to do it from an inactive file. I can do everything I want to do in a draft. You can go nuts. But if it's an active file, the system looks at it as a done art, a legal art. It's not going to let you change stuff, okay? So how do we do this? Well, most of your users can't. They're going to have to come to an administrator. Most administrators, well, all administrators should have access to this PEIMS history art.
So that's where I'm going to stop because now she's going to go more into stuff that's really just applicable to me. But that's one of the things that I tried to point out is that when you're in the active record, if you're trying to change something, and you probably experienced it before, where you're trying to put a date and then you get this error that says you're entering a date that's earlier, something that already was in there. And you keep getting that error, then you end up having to contact me and I have to go into what she's kind of pointing to here and try to figure out what's going on. And at this point, sometimes, well, the past couple of times that it's happened, what I'm telling you is that, well, I'm not gonna go into the details of that right now because it'll probably just confuse you more. What I would like to do is, again, reassure you that these videos are linked in the, screen by screen. Okay, so these videos are linked in the screen by screen that you have access to. They are in my, YouTube. If you have, just go to my eSPED, my J Knuckles tab YouTube channel. Let's see if we've got some questions here, and then I will, every time I click that, it says it's disabled, and it is disabled right now. That's something that we reviewed earlier. We're not going live with the sync yet. There's a lot of other pieces that have to come together between Frontline, SIS, and eSPED before we go live. We're trying to get everybody trained and ready to go and start practicing completing all of the PEIMS fields prior to everything going live right now, which is why it's kind of hard to do this training and why I'm using these Frontline videos to show you what it would look like. So I'm going to go into the IEP itself, into eSPED itself, and I'm going to go into this fake student and kind of show you at least what I can. One of the errors that she showed us that does not look like it's a PEIMS field but was showing up as an error was it said the student's grade wasn't entered, which I thought was interesting because it doesn't look like it's a PEIMS field. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't know. This kid is 15 years old. What grade did kids in? I don't know. 10th? I have no idea. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that. So make sure that there's a grade level. And usually that is something right now because it's demographic information is syncing. But you'll notice right now what this says. Right now it says exclude from nightly PEIMS report. Once we have the switch to syncing, and this is activated. It will never be activated for a fake student. It will be once for currently served RDSPD. Those will be the two that it will be activated for. So the practice, Cynthia, is you're filling in every single PEIMS field instead of only the ones that are relative to your student. So even though your student may be 15, I'm still going to address the early childhood information fields instead of ignoring them or leaving them blank like I've been trained to so far because we didn't have a system that synced with the SIS. So that's going to be the difference. Okay, so now I'm going to get into, here we go into the PEIMS data field. Right now for this guy, it's nada. Now, remember, she said if it was PEIMS reportable and it was syncing, this code would be changing. Well, this guy is going to have a fake, his status is fake. And so for a fake student, it's never going to be included, but let's let that be. Rather than go, I can show you by going, using that go button to go directly to the screen. And I could show you, okay, to edit the PEIM. I know that this is a PEIMS field because it has that notepad with the pencil on it with edit. And I can click on that and I can click my disability. And I can click that was my effective date. Okay. And I realize that my other stuff up here isn't checked, but for right now, that's not what we're focusing on. We're focusing just on the PEIMS fields. Okay. So right now the student is just has a speech impairment. All right. So let's go back. We now have the return tab available to us because we came to it through a go button or through a blue button. And now we see that this primary disability is reported. Now remember that the exceptions are secondary and tertiary. Those disability fields can be left blank if the student doesn't have them. Next, we have our instructional setting code. So rather than going, as Tiffany calls it, one off and one off and one off, I just assume go through as if I'm preparing an ARD and come to the PEIMS naturally as I prep an ARD. So I would go to my next screen. I'm coming down the fields. I'm coming down the fields. I don't see any PEIMS fields on here, right? Do I see any PEIMS fields here? I don't see any PEIMS fields unless my student is also dyslexic, and then I would need to be filling out these PEIMS fields. And I believe, and I will have to, I think once we flip the switch, we will know exactly what is the trigger for telling us if this student is dyslexic, then it will trigger the errors if the others are inconsistent. At this point, I'm not quite sure because the dyslexia screens are new as far as my experience in what they set off in my previous districts when I had PEIMS syncing. So edit assistive technology with this PEIMS field. This is a PEIMS field right here. So I'm going to select no, And I'm going to select, I'm just pretending this was the date of my ARD or the date, the effective date. Because assistive technology is something that should be reviewed every year, that date should be updated every year. I don't see any PEIMS fields here. I don't see any PEIMS fields here. Don't see any there. I do see that this PEIMS field is here, but remember it's already pre-filled. It's already been taken care of for me. I've already addressed it, okay? Just making sure all of this is already taken care of. We're pretending the rest of this has already been filled out. Oh gosh, I've done such a beautiful job at developing this art. I'm going to go through all those as if I've completed them. Do I see any PEIMS fields here? No. Do I see PEIMS fields here? No. PEIMS fields and STAR accommodations? No. PEIMS fields and physical fitness? No. Do I see PEIMS fields and TELPAS? No. TELPAS previous scores? No. District-wide assessment? No. LRE? No. None on here. I'm looking for that notepad icon with the pencil and the edit next to it. I'm not seeing any of those things, any of that. I don't see any PEIMS fields here. Okay. Now, once I enter something in here, you know, if I were to enter a course, some districts only enter special education courses. But again, this is not something that is going to trigger an error. That's not something that pops up for you guys. Now this, if I put in, I'm just putting in, the student is going to get some co-teaching support daily. And I'm going to, oh, it doesn't, gotcha. So the supports would start, we said 11/13, and then they would end the last day of this school year. So I'm going to hit save. If these dates were empty, that would cause a problem. Okay, I know that this doesn't look like, see how right here, the little pencil piece shows that it's a PEIMS field. Now it may not be PEIMS billable, but it is a PEIMS field. Let me go ahead and go back to the course curriculum area and enter in, yeah, I'll just put, 2021. Okay, sorry. Generalized setting, and then now it's going to be from here until the last day of school, because that's how we enter. So you see how this, it does turn into a PEIMS field in as far as you need to start and an end date. And we know that for our classes, for our related services, for our support services, we must have start and end dates. So I'm going to assume that you can translate that to related service screen. And I'm going to go on next because we've got 10 minutes left. I'm sorry, that's the R20 screen. Placement of services screen. Now we don't use the interim. We never use that middle box. We do use the next year. Current year instructional setting, 40. enter the effective date. If my PWN wasn't waived, then I would have to put the date that PWN goes in, that everything goes into effect. And we never use the mid-year instructional setting code. We're only using next year's. Current year speech. Now remember, my kid is speech only. So what am I clicking? I'm clicking 1, speech therapy only. And then the effective date would be that date of that ARD. And then again, for next year, it would be speech therapy only. Now, here's where we get to the part that we had some question about. My kid's 15. Previously, I just left the rest of this blank. He wasn't an RD-SPD kid. He was an early childhood kid. Right now, it's not going to cause an error, but as soon as these the switches flipped, say in January, you're going to have some errors. And some of them are going to be fatal, and you won't be able to archive, you won't be able to process your draft, you won't be able to even print. So you're going to start now learning how to fill in these fields and getting in the routine of completing all of these fields. So is my student served through early childhood? No. When's that effective? Just put your, well, I'm not going to freeze. Save. Okay, and then the service location, you'll notice you don't even have to think about it if it's not applicable to this child. I'm just entering a 0 and putting in the date. And for next year, it would be the same thing, 0. Kids just getting older, not getting Benjamin Button age, not going backwards. And then again, for early childhood intervention, no. It's like, you know, and we're in special ed, we have to be repetitively redundant over and over. Okay, so here's one of those exceptions that we talked about. The exception will be dependent upon how we answer this question. Regional day school for the deaf. So is my student enrolled in regional day school for the program for the deaf? No, my student is not. My student is only speech impaired. So I'm going to save that information with the date. And I know that because they're not participating, they're not enrolled in regional day school for the deaf, there's not a provider. So the exception here is also that I leave the provider blank. I do need to fill out interpreting services, and that we do not provide interpreting services because they're not needed. They're not provided. We're going to put the date here, complete that PEIMS field. None of the rest of these are PEIMS fields. And then I'm going to go to the next screen, and the next screen, no PEIMS fields, and the next screen. This again, here's your hidden little assistive technology, just showing you again. And my signatures. And then I'm going to show you, well, here's my prior written notice. There's no little PEIMS fields on here, but let me show you on the end of ARD, there's one more little PEIMS field that gets forgotten and lost, and he's forgotten, but it's about funding and we can't forget him. And it's often forgotten in that initial ARD because all of the things below this are about initial ARDs. It's the edit the child count funding. So when we click on this, if the student is eligible for services, we're clicking IDAB funding. And really, this should be done at the initial ARD, and then it should never change. Okay. So I've kind of run through real quickly because I don't think it's really effective to start at your PEIMS data screen. I think it makes much more sense, clearly, to go through and see how all my dates have been in here. I didn't get into dyslexia because that wasn't an issue for my student. Residential facility tracker, again, it wasn't an issue for my student. And we were going to see, again, some of these issues we're going to have to deal with as language acquisition is something that is new this year, just dealing with the new House bill. So we're going to have to deal with some of these as we learn, as that switch gets flipped for us. The very next thing that I'm going to ask for you guys to do is, and I will still be available for a while if you guys have more questions and whatnot, but I have I'm going to do another giveaway, but while I do that, I'm going to ask you, I have a completely anonymous survey, and this is part of my professional goal this year to try to help grow myself. It is completely anonymous. It is a survey in SurveyMonkey. Again, it is completely anonymous. Will you please take 3 minutes and click on this link and provide me with some feedback, some constructive feedback? Again, it's completely anonymous. So I would really just like your feedback. Again, that's part of my goal this year. And I need that to help grow professionally. And while you're doing that, I am going to come back in, and then I'm going to come back to the chat to see if I've got questions, but I want to come back in and spin the wheel again. So while you guys are doing the survey, I am going to music is so dramatic. Oh my God. It is Jazare. Jazare. Are you with us, Jazare? Jazare, have you won before? Jazare. Jazare. Jazare, have you won before? What do you prefer? Amazon or Starbucks? Sorry, my words, you know. Starbucks. Jazare did. She is like, I used to have a friend that would call in all the time to radio programs, and she would always win. So Jazare is like, she's somebody you want to take to Vegas with you. Absolutely. Way to go. That's awesome. You guys are amazing. This is awesome. I really do want to be able to go back up here. I'm hoping that y'all are filling out that survey. I'm going to post that link again. And then I'm going to be here for you guys, and I'm going to go up here and see if there's more questions I'm sure that I haven't gotten to. Okay, so so changes for PEIMS must be done in the draft mode. No, that's not true. It's simply that if you're in the active and you're making some changes, it may give you trouble. And so you may have to contact me via email. And remember, I'm going to type in my email here for everybody. That I am jknuckles1, and Knuckles is with an N-U-C-K-L-E-S. It's a knucklehead way to spell knuckles. So no, the rules at opening drafts are the same. It's just that you may have more trouble when you're trying to deal with some errors when you're in the active file, depending on what the particular error could be. So it could be considered a clerical error. Good question, Cynthia. I'm not exactly sure what you were referring to. So here's another question. If we prep a draft ARD early and complete the PEIMS on the date we're anticipating the ARD to be held and the ARD date changes, do we have to go through the PEIMS again and change all the dates? to the actual ARD date. Well, you would have to change the applicable fields to the effective date, yes. And again, not all of those dates have to be changed. Like the disability dates aren't, unless they're changing, wouldn't necessarily be changed. And that's something that I can, I'm gonna make a note to myself to work on those that, which fields should be updated annually versus as they change. Maybe that's something that I can work on. So you have maybe like a cheat sheet. Like the instructional setting. If the instructional setting isn't changed, I don't necessarily know that you need to go in there and if it's staying the same, that you need to change it. One of the things that she had talked about was when I do the beginning of the year rollover. And again, this is something I'll have to talk about with the directors. Do we want to, and I think we do, I currently do, have that PEIMS reportable date for the set to that beginning of the year date or that summer date. So I'll try to make a work on, I think that's Mr. Martinez asking that question. But I'll try to work on some sort of maybe a cheat sheet about which ones would have to change. So I'm making a note, sorry for my kind of silence there. But yeah, they would have to change, just like your schedule of services and all the dates throughout the ARD would need to change. It's that with the PEIMS elements, it's not, they're hidden from you really. You have to go into them to see them and change them. So that's a great question and a great point that we need to make sure that I start adding into my training, because I have a little cheat sheet and a little how-to about how to address it easily when you're changing it for your goals and everything. But now if we're changing dates for PEIMS elements, that's different. If the funding button was not clicked at the initial R, do we put the current date or the date of the initial? You can go ahead and put in the current date at this point, that's fine, rather than trying to research it. If you go to because I don't know that backdating it may give you an issue if you try to backdate it. If anything else was ever entered, which I doubt it was, but it could be that if you go to this consolidation of important dates, it could be if you're able to see the initial ARD date right here, if you're able to see that and enter that date in easily enough, then enter in the initial ARD date. If you're not, then just click the date of your ARD, and that's fine. Does the student no longer get funding after age 18? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but no, we still get funding for the student as long as we're serving them, depending on what kind of funding we're talking about. We are able to update PEIMS data for now in the draft. How about for ARDs after January? Just to clarify, we need to complete an amendment or a revision ARD. So you're able to update PEIMS data in the active, and you should only be opening a draft for the same reason that you open a draft now, which is if it's some type of annual review, if it includes some type of annual review. Once that switch gets flipped, and there'll of course be big announcements, and y'all see on the announcement screen, you know, I'm trying to train everybody. The first thing you do is look right here, and clearly 79, 80 of y'all did that. I'm so excited. when y'all see that the PEIMS is syncing now, if you're getting errors that go uncorrected, so for instance, if you have an instructional setting error and it needs to be corrected, you would have to come back and do a revision art to fix the instructional setting. Oh, thank you, Beatrice. That's very kind. I thank y'all for all your kind words. I again want to really, 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 really thank Andrea for helping me today. I know that's not what you signed up for, but God bless you. I know that I'm still trying to get through some questions here. Okay, if I'm understanding correctly, you mentioned not updating the dates of the disability each ARD. Is this because I've been told to update? Oh, okay. Is this new? Because I had been told to update them each ARD. Okay, so that's coming from D. Cervantes. So D. Cervantes, are you still with us?
Yes.
Okay, so D. Cervantes, tell me are you a teacher? Are you administration? I mean, are
A teacher.
You're a teacher.
Case teacher. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so was it assessment that told you that? Because then I'm wrong.
No, I was just like in when people were training me, they're like, okay, this is what you need to update every ARD, you know. So that's what I had been doing. And when he's told me this, I'm like, okay. I said, wow, this is the first time I hear of that. So
well, it's not changing. And right now, so this is what happens right now since we don't sync. The only thing that our SIMS clerks go in and enter right now are things that have changed. Mm-hmm. They're not even able to enter in annual ARD dates right now into the SIS. So really, I don't, and I can get clarification from that from our assessment staff, but I don't see why we would change that every year if it's not changing.
Yes, that makes sense. And I just want to make sure I'm like doing it correctly and doing it, you know, like it's supposed to be done. So, okay.
Right. And I'm all about, you know, let's not one less field, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
One less field.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Sure, you bet. Sorry, I'm writing a note. Check with assessment.
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question that she asked?
If we're updating the effective date of the disability every annual, which I don't think we would. I think it would be effective the date that we initially kind of accepted the disability at first. Does that make sense? But I'm going to make sure. I don't think we would need to be updating. And I think different districts do it differently. But I think that's our district, would be our district's, is our district's take on it. But I'm going to make sure. Sorry, I'm writing my note. Let's see. Another cheat sheet. My question, does the student still refunding after 21? No, they are able to, so the year the student turns 21, if they turn 21 after September, they're able to continue services in the public education system through that year, depending if they're, still eligible, depending on their graduation status, if they're like continuing for transition services and stuff. Mr. or Mrs. Martinez asking that question, sorry. Is this funding question ever related to Medicaid? Medicaid is a separate issue, but it is a funding issue. It's not a PEIMS issue, but it is one the parent would have to give consent for, and the student would have to be eligible for. How will we know when all this becomes active? Oh, I have some real sarcastic answers for that, being that it's 2020 and this whole Jumanji meme that I showed earlier comes to mind. There will be, like, you see this announcement right here, an announcement like that. Your SPED support staff will be getting that message out to y'all, and you will see a change in all of a sudden things like, sorry, District eStar administrator has deactivated. All of a sudden it will not say that anymore, and it will, instead of it saying, as long as this says currently served or RDSPD, it would say include in nightly PEIMS export. So there'll be some, you'll start getting errors. So there's a couple of places you saw on the PEIMS data, there's this validate PEIMS button right here. When you have errors, it will look like the videos where I showed you, it said so many errors. It had like a little hazard sign, maybe a triangle, and then had so many errors. That's also on the placement of services 1 screen. This validate PEIMS, of course, it's not working right now, but once you click it, it would show you those errors. Unfortunately, it's not going to come out like with, trumpets and a parade and, frighten you, but it might scare you if you have a lot of errors, but don't let it frighten you and scare you. We will be able to get you through this. Thank you, guys. Are there any other questions? Y'all can feel free to unmute yourselves to ask me questions as well. And I am going to make sure that I get into performance matters. Even if you weren't registered, I'll try to get you registered and make sure that everyone gets the full credit for this, not just, I think it was initially set up as 1 hour, but I had changed it to 2 hours, but I'll make sure that everybody gets the full credit for 2 hours for this. Will there be future trainings on this as well? So I anticipate that this particular training today will also be offered again. I'm envisioning a particular scenario, but I anticipate as we go, they'll have to be as it has been live, and I will be able to actually do what they did in the frontline videos. Yes, that I will be able to do some more trainings. So do I know when those will be? No, but I anticipate, yes, there will be other trainings. At this point, I certainly see that today's training is going to have to be made available to anyone who didn't receive it, because everybody needs to know this information so that we're all properly prepared when it comes time for that switch to be flipped. I like how I'm just acting like it's a switch to be flipped because there's a lot more things that go on behind the scenes. Thank you so much. I am so excited that we had so many of you guys participating. That's been terrific. Absolutely. I hope you guys have been able to complete the Lord words, you know, they're escaping me. The survey would be a great help for me too. Post that one more time just in case. It is completely anonymous. Y'all have been terrific. I am just so excited to have had so many folks on a PD and PJ session because I know I had competing sessions out there, and that has drawn away some of my crowd before, but I'm very excited. I get pumped. Thanks, guys. Yeah, y'all can feel free. Please just do the survey and then you can go on your merry way. Have a great weekend and one more week, and then you'll be able to have some turkey and stay safe, and come back for a couple more weeks and then have yourself some nice downtime. Thank you guys so much. And for those of you that are winners, if you're still on, I'll be getting those sent out to you soon too. Andrea, you have to tell me if you're still here with us, if you want Amazon or Starbucks, or if you want 10 of each.
I'll take Amazon.
Yeah, baby. I'm an Amazon Prime, well, lover, let's just say.
This was a great training. You did an awesome job.
Good, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this for me. I am so sorry. I'll make sure that even if this isn't, the recording isn't posted globally, that you get it. Thank you, Andrea. We are good. Okay. I'm going to go ahead, I think, and of course I had not